Section 47, Row 12, Grave 336. Robert Bobby Martinez had been visiting the same plot at Arlington West Cemetery for 47 years, every March 15th, the date Tommy Chen died in a rice paddy outside Da Nang. But today, Bobby's annual pilgrimage would collide with another funeral. The kind where mourners arrived in Bentleys and the deceased got a marble headstone worth more than most houses. Welcome to our channel, where we expose the ugly truth about how America treats its forgotten heroes. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. You're about to witness the most heartbreaking display of class warfare ever caught on camera at a sacred burial ground. Before we dive into what happened at this cemetery last Tuesday, write in the comments how old you are and what city you're from. Your voice matters more than you know by the end of this story. Bobby Martinez looked older than his 73 years. Vietnam had aged him in ways that showed: the slight tremor in his hands from Agent Orange exposure, the pronounced limp from shrapnel that doctors never fully removed, the haunted look that never quite left the eyes of men who'd seen too much too young. He parked his 20-year-old Honda Civic in the cemetery's free section, half a mile from where the catered funeral was taking place. Walking that distance on his bad leg took 15 minutes, but Bobby had learned patience during 2 tours in Southeast Asia and 50 years of dealing with a system that seemed determined to forget he existed. The flowers were grocery store carnations, $3 for a small bouquet, which was what Bobby could afford after paying for his medications. Not fancy, but Tommy Chen had grown up poor in San Francisco's Chinatown. He would have understood about choosing between flowers and food. Tommy had been 19 when the mortar round hit their fire base. 19 years old with a girlfriend back home who sent letters every week and parents who worked 16-hour days at a laundry to pay for his college fund. Money that would never be needed because Tommy's college years ended in a body bag shipped home to parents who spoke broken English and trusted their government to take care of their boy. Section 47 was the veterans area, where headstones stood in perfect military rows like soldiers still standing at attention. Simple granite markers with names, dates, and service information. No elaborate sculptures or family mausoleums, just the quiet dignity of men and women who'd served their country and asked for nothing more than to be remembered. Bobby walked carefully between the graves, his worn dress shoes, the same ones he'd bought for Tommy's funeral in 1976, clicking softly on the paved walkway. He'd changed into his old Army uniform for the visit, the same ritual every year. The jacket was too big now, hanging loose on a frame that had shrunk with age and illness. But the ribbons and patches were exactly where regulations specified. Tommy's grave was simple. Thomas Chen, Specialist E4, United States Army, Vietnam War, age 19. Below that, words Bobby had chosen himself when Tommy's parents asked him to handle the military arrangements. Died far from home, fighting for freedom. Bobby knelt slowly, his artificial knee joint protesting, and placed the carnations against the headstone. Hey Tommy, 47 years today. Can you believe that? I'm getting old, brother. Doctor says the cancer's spreading, but I'm still here, still coming to see you. The one-sided conversation was interrupted by voices from the adjacent section of the cemetery. Loud voices, laughter, the kind of celebration that seemed inappropriate in a place dedicated to the dead. Bobby looked up to see white tents covering an elaborate funeral service 200 yards away. Professional catering trucks, hired security in black suits, a jazz band setting up near a marble monument that must have cost $50,000. People in expensive clothing gathering to mourn someone whose death was apparently worth celebrating in style. Must be nice, Bobby said quietly to Tommy's headstone. Some people get jazz bands at their funeral. You got a bugler who showed up drunk and played taps off key. Bobby had planned to stay for his usual 30 minutes, telling Tommy about the past year, updating him on mutual friends who were still alive, sharing the kind of conversation they might have had over beers if Tommy had made it home. But the noise from the elaborate funeral was getting louder, more intrusive, disturbing the peaceful atmosphere that made these visits bearable. He decided to walk over and politely ask them to keep it down. Veterans section deserved respect, even if the mourners for the wealthy deceased didn't realize they were disrupting sacred ground. That decision would change everything. As Bobby approached the catered funeral, he could see the setup more clearly. Not just a burial service. This was a networking event disguised as mourning. Business cards being exchanged, deals being discussed. The kind of people who saw opportunity in every situation, even death. The deceased, according to the elaborate program being handed out by uniformed ushers, was Reginald Whitmore III, real estate developer, political donor, pillar of the community. The kind of man who'd built his fortune while other men built the freedom that made such fortunes possible. Bobby approached one of the security guards, a young man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd learned conflict resolution from action movies rather than real-world experience. "Excuse me," Bobby said politely. "I'm visiting a friend's grave over in the veterans section, and the music is carrying quite a bit. Would it be possible to turn it down just a little?" The security guard looked Bobby up and down, taking in the ill-fitting uniform, the worn shoes, the careful way he carried himself to compensate for old injuries. "This is a private funeral, old man. You need to move along." "I understand it's private," Bobby replied, still maintaining the respect for authority that had been drilled into him 50 years ago. "I'm just asking if you could lower the volume slightly. We're trying to pay respects to fallen soldiers." The guard stepped closer, using his size to intimidate. "I said move along. This area is reserved for people who matter." That's when things escalated beyond what anyone could have anticipated. Hit that like button if this story got you hooked, because what happened next would expose the rotting core of American privilege. The guard's comment hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. People who matter. As if Tommy Chen hadn't mattered when he threw himself on a grenade to save his squad. As if the thousands of names carved into marble around them didn't matter because they died poor and young and far from home. Bobby felt something snap inside his chest. Not anger exactly. Anger was hot, explosive, the kind of emotion that got soldiers killed in combat. This was colder, deeper, the quiet fury of a man who'd spent 50 years being told his sacrifice didn't count because he hadn't turned it into fortune. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Bobby said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands getting worse. "I served 2 tours in Vietnam. I'm visiting my friend's grave. I'm not asking you to shut down your event. I'm asking for basic courtesy." The security guard laughed. Actually laughed. "Vietnam? Dude, that was like 50 years ago. Nobody cares about that ancient history anymore." Ancient history. Bobby had heard that phrase before, usually from politicians cutting veteran benefits or college students who thought the 1960s were as irrelevant as the Civil War. Ancient history didn't wake you up screaming at 3 a.m. Ancient history didn't require daily medications to manage pain from wounds that never fully healed. "My friend died when he was 19 years old," Bobby said quietly. "His parents never got over it. His girlfriend waited for 2 years before accepting he wasn't coming home. That's not ancient history to me." The guard was getting impatient, probably eager to get back to his important work of protecting rich people from poor veterans. "Look, Grandpa, this is a closed area for invited guests only. If you're not on the list, you need to leave." "I'm not trying to crash your party," Bobby said. "I'm visiting a grave in the veterans section. This is a public cemetery." "Not this part." The guard gestured toward the elaborate funeral setup. "This section has been reserved. Private event. You're trespassing." Bobby pulled out his phone and checked the cemetery's website. The veterans section was clearly marked as public access, 24 hours a day. The Whitmore funeral had permits for tents and catering, but no authority to block access to adjacent areas. "According to the cemetery's website," Bobby began, but the guard cut him off. "I don't care what some website says, I'm telling you to leave." That's when Vivian Whitmore, the billionaire's widow, approached. She'd been watching the confrontation from under the main tent, probably wondering why her hired security couldn't handle one old man more efficiently. Vivian Whitmore was everything Bobby wasn't. Expensively dressed, professionally styled, carrying herself with the confidence that comes from never being told no by anyone who mattered. She looked at Bobby the way people look at homeless veterans panhandling outside luxury restaurants. "Is there a problem here?" she asked the guard, not bothering to acknowledge Bobby's existence. "Just some vagrant trying to crash the service, Mrs. Whitmore. I'm handling it." Vagrant. The word hit Bobby like a punch to the chest. He'd worked 40 years at the post office after Vietnam, paid his taxes, raised 2 kids, buried a wife. Never asked for handouts or special treatment, just tried to live quietly with memories that most people couldn't imagine carrying. "I'm not a vagrant," Bobby said, finding his voice despite the humiliation burning in his throat. "I'm a veteran visiting a friend's grave." Vivian Whitmore's expression didn't change. "This is a private ceremony for people who were invited. If you weren't invited, you're just..." She paused, looking for the right word. "You're just in the way." The dismissal was casual, effortless. Bobby Martinez, 2 Bronze Stars, Purple Heart, 47 years of faithfully honoring his dead friend, was just in the way of people who mattered. "Dogs would be more appropriate here than you," the security guard added, apparently feeling bold with his employer's backing. "At least dogs know when they're not wanted." "What would you do in our hero's place?" Bobby stood there for a moment, processing the assault on his dignity. Around him, the elaborate funeral continued. Jazz music playing while a few hundred yards away, Tommy Chen lay in unmarked silence. Champagne being served while Bobby couldn't afford to replace his worn-out shoes. The contrast was devastating. 2 American men, both dead, both being remembered by the living. One got marble monuments and catered celebrations. The other got $3 carnations and a friend who walked half a mile on a bad leg to say hello. Bobby reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. His DD-214 discharge papers, which he carried everywhere out of habit. Most veterans did. Proof of service that could sometimes open doors or soften hearts when dealing with bureaucrats or skeptical civilians. "I served in the 1st Infantry Division," Bobby said, unfolding the document. 2 tours, Bronze Star with V device for valor in combat, Purple Heart for wounds received in action. Vivian Whitmore glanced at the papers with the same interest she might show for a grocery store receipt. "That's very nice, but this is still a private event." The security guard was getting more aggressive, probably sensing his employer's growing impatience. "Look, hero, I don't care if you've got a Medal of Honor. You're not invited, which means you're trespassing." Bobby refolded his discharge papers carefully and put them back in his jacket. 50 years of defending his right to exist in the country he'd served. 50 years of proving he belonged in the America he'd helped preserve. "I fought for this country," he said simply. "So did a lot of people," Vivian replied. "That doesn't give you the right to disrupt private events." The security guard stepped forward, placing his hand on Bobby's shoulder. Not violently, but with clear intent to physically remove him from the area. "Time to go, old man." Bobby looked around at the elaborate funeral one more time. The jazz band was playing something upbeat, celebratory. The mourners were networking, making deals, turning even death into opportunity. This was America too, the America that Bobby had fought to protect, even if it didn't want to protect him back. He brushed the guard's hand off his shoulder with surprising firmness. "Don't touch me." "Or what?" the guard challenged. "You'll have a flashback? Start crying about your dead friends?" That did it. Not the insult to Bobby, but the mockery of Tommy Chen and every other name carved into granite in Section 47. The suggestion that remembering fallen soldiers was weakness rather than honor. Bobby's military training kicked in. 50 years old, but muscle memory doesn't forget how to handle someone who's all size and no skill. The guard found himself flat on his back faster than he could process what had happened. Bobby's artificial knee planted firmly on his chest. "Never," Bobby said quietly, "mock the dead." But Bobby Martinez had just made the worst mistake of his post-war life. Because in 2025, everything was recorded, and he was about to become the latest viral video of an unstable veteran losing control. 3 different funeral guests had their phones out, recording the moment a decorated veteran put a security guard on the ground. But they weren't filming a story about disrespect at a cemetery. They were capturing content about a violent veteran attacking an innocent worker. Bobby realized his mistake immediately. He stepped back, helping the guard to his feet, but the damage was done. In an era where context mattered less than clicks, the narrative was already being written in real time. "Did you see that?" one guest said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "That veteran just assaulted someone." "Typical PTSD behavior," another added. "These guys are dangerous." Vivian Whitmore pulled out her phone and dialed 911. "Yes, I need police at Arlington West Cemetery. A veteran just attacked one of our security guards. He seems unstable." Bobby wanted to explain. The guard had mocked his dead friend, had dismissed decades of service and sacrifice, had treated him like trash for the crime of being poor and old and broken by war. But explanations don't fit into viral video captions. The first police car arrived within 5 minutes. Officer Janet Rodriguez had been on the force for 12 years and had seen enough veteran encounters to recognize the signs. Bobby was standing at attention, hands visible, no sudden movements. This wasn't a dangerous criminal. This was a scared old man who'd made a mistake. "Sir, I need you to stay calm and tell me what happened here," Officer Rodriguez said. Before Bobby could answer, Vivian Whitmore approached with her version of events. "This man crashed our private funeral service and attacked our security guard when asked to leave. We have video evidence." The guard, whose name turned out to be Marcus Webb, was already showing his phone to other officers. The video was clear. Bobby putting him on the ground. What it didn't show was the 5 minutes of verbal abuse that preceded the physical confrontation. "I was just visiting my friend's grave," Bobby said quietly. "I asked them to turn down the music. They told me I didn't belong here." Officer Rodriguez looked around, taking in the elaborate funeral setup, then glancing toward the veterans section where Bobby's car was parked. "Where's your friend buried, sir?" "Section 47, row 12. Bobby pointed toward the area where he'd left the carnations. "Tommy Chen, died March 15, 1976. Rodriguez walked over to verify, leaving Bobby with 2 other officers who were less sympathetic. They'd already seen the video, already heard Vivian Whitmore's version. In their minds, this was another case of an unstable veteran causing problems for decent citizens. When Rodriguez returned, she was carrying the grocery store carnations Bobby had left at Tommy's grave. "These yours?" "Yes, ma'am." Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next, because what Officer Rodriguez discovered would change everything. Rodriguez had done something the other responders hadn't bothered with. She'd looked up Tommy Chen in the cemetery's database. What she found made her understand exactly what kind of man she was dealing with. "Mr. Martinez, according to cemetery records, you've been visiting Specialist Chen's grave every March 15th for 47 years. Is that correct?" "Yes, ma'am." "And according to military records, you served together in the same unit, 1st Infantry Division, Vietnam." "Yes, ma'am." Rodriguez turned to address the crowd that had gathered around the Whitmore funeral. "Ladies and gentlemen, this man is not a trespasser or a troublemaker. He's been coming to this cemetery for almost 50 years to honor his fallen friend." But the damage was already spreading online. The video of Bobby's confrontation with the security guard had been posted to multiple social media platforms with inflammatory captions. "Violent veteran attacks innocent worker. PTSD rage caught on camera. When military training goes wrong." Vivian Whitmore wasn't satisfied with just having Bobby arrested. She wanted him humiliated, discredited, removed from her perfect world of privilege and wealth. "Officer, this man clearly has mental health issues. He shouldn't be allowed around decent people." That's when Rodriguez made a decision that would expose the truth about what really happened at Arlington West Cemetery. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see your permits for this event, and I want to review all the video footage, not just the 30 seconds that's been posted online." "What do you think the antagonist deserves?" The answer was about to become very clear. The permits told an interesting story. The Whitmore family had paid for exclusive use of their burial plot and immediate surrounding area, but they had no authority to block access to the veterans section or to prevent people from visiting graves in adjacent areas. More importantly, Rodriguez found security camera footage from the cemetery's main office that showed the entire confrontation from beginning to end. Bobby approaching politely, asking about the music volume, being verbally abused and physically threatened before finally defending himself. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. One of the funeral guests, Dr. Patricia Vance, had been recording the entire event for the family's personal archives. Her footage captured every word of the confrontation, including the guard's comment about dogs being more appropriate than veterans. "I think people need to see the whole story," Dr. Vance told Rodriguez quietly. "What happened to that old soldier was shameful." Rodriguez gathered all the evidence, the permits, the security footage, Dr. Vance's complete recording, and made her own video. Not for social media fame or viral content, but because a decorated veteran deserved to have his story told truthfully. Her video went online with a simple title, "The Truth About Arlington West Cemetery." It included Bobby's service record, his 47-year tradition of visiting Tommy Chen's grave, and the complete context of what Vivian Whitmore and her security guard had said to a Purple Heart recipient. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Veterans organizations shared the video. News outlets picked up the story. The original clips showing Bobby as an unstable aggressor were drowned out by the truth about what really happened. But the most powerful response came from an unexpected source. Reginald Whitmore IV, the deceased billionaire's son, who had been watching the entire controversy unfold from his home in California. At 6 p.m. that evening, while Bobby Martinez sat in his kitchen wondering if he'd be spending his remaining years in prison, his doorbell rang. Outside stood a young man in an expensive suit carrying a large floral arrangement. "Mr. Martinez, I'm Reggie Whitmore. My father was buried today at Arlington West." Bobby recognized the face from newspaper articles about the family's business empire, but the expression was different from what he'd expected. Shame, not anger. "I saw the video, all of it. What my stepmother and that security guard said to you was inexcusable." Bobby invited him in, still confused about why the billionaire's son was standing in his modest living room. "My father served in Korea," Reggie continued. "Bronze Star, just like yours. He would have been horrified by what happened today. He always said that every veteran deserves respect, regardless of their circumstances." The flowers were for Tommy Chen's grave, an elaborate arrangement that probably cost more than Bobby spent on groceries in a month. But there was something else. "I've spoken with my family's attorney. We're dropping all charges against you. Furthermore, we're establishing the Thomas Chen Memorial Fund to support veterans visiting graves of fallen comrades. Transportation, flowers, whatever they need." Bobby sat down heavily, overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of fortune. "There's one more thing," Reggie said. "My stepmother will be making a public apology tomorrow, and that security guard will never work in this industry again." As Reggie Whitmore left, Bobby looked at the elaborate floral arrangement designed for his friend's grave. For 47 years, he'd brought $3 carnations. Tomorrow, Tommy Chen would have flowers fit for a hero. But the real victory wasn't the expensive flowers or the public apology. It was the restoration of dignity to a man who'd served his country faithfully and asked for nothing in return except the right to remember his fallen friends. Bobby Martinez walked to his closet and carefully hung up his dress uniform, already planning his visit to Section 47, Row 12, Grave 336 the next morning.